Welcome back, everyone. This is And Her Name Is, and my name is Jenny Moutou, your host. Today, I'm talking to an experienced board director and international expert on corporate governance. This dynamic lady has been an advisor to mid and small cap boards and a champion of company directors looking to have a great impact on a shoestring budget. She is the author of the Director's Dilemma newsletter and 5 practical books that show how directors can respond to real-life situations with effective leadership. I love the context that she brings to governance and working with boards and how all of that comes together in a discussion around the imposter. This wonderful lady really adds a whole new dimension to that conversation. So if you're in the corporate space or running a business or a charity where governance and directorship is involved, I think you're really going to love what she has to bring to the table here. If you're not in either of those spaces, I still think there's an opportunity to listen for the gold in this interview because the breadth and range of knowledge and her expertise will blow you out of the water. Allow me to introduce her. Her name is Julie Garland McLellan. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I have the amazing Julie Garland McLellan with me. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining. Julie and I met on a webinar for speakers, and I was really interested in hearing more about her story because, as you know, this podcast is all about exploring the topic of imposter syndrome. And the more I've been doing this, the more I'm seeing all these nuances in the manifestation of imposter syndrome. And of course, when we were on the webinar, you just happened to mention something about imposter that kind of pricked my ears. And I thought, yes, I'd love to get into this. So for our audience who may not have met you before, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a boardroom specialist. I have served on more than 24 boards over the last 30 years. I have consulted to boards and still do. And I also train executives in how to write better board papers. So those are the 3 things I do. I mentor the occasional director as part of my consulting and also as part of my giving back to some of the not-for-profit boards and the lovely people who volunteer their time on those. So that's sort of me.
So what does that encompass? So for somebody who might be interested in being on a board or having some activity on a board, what does that encompass in terms of the roles that you do or the kinds of things that you help people with?
Yeah,
in the nitty-gritty, you know?
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how many people want to be on boards and then get there and go, oh, don't actually like this much. I think I'll go back to being an executive or a consultant, or I'll only be on these particular boards because I'm so passionate about what they do. But the main reason we have boards at all is because a company is a synthetic person. It has the legal rights of a person. It can buy and sell property. It can sue and be sued. It can plan. It has perpetual succession, which people don't, but that's okay. We weren't designed to be immortal. But the scary thing about synthetic people, as in incorporated entities, is they don't have any morals. They don't have any conscience. They don't
Yeah.
have that much in the way of awareness of themselves. So they rely on the people in them to provide those things. And as a board, you'll sometimes hear the Latin phrase mens rea, which is the guiding mind. But you're not just there like the Qantas board to make as much profit as you possibly can. You are there to give the ethical compass, to provide the values, to be the conscience of the organization, and to restrain it from unrestricted self-interest so that you get a better long-term outcome rather
Mm-hmm.
than a very lucrative short-term outcome. So, in a
Mm.
nutshell, it's almost like adopting a child when you join a board, apart from the fact that you're
Yeah.
expected to give it back and walk away after a few years.
Yeah. Wow, that's such an amazing visual. Like my mind has just exploded with the visual you created, and such a great way to talk about it. And the comparison of users is quite an interesting one. So what do you find, what do you find then when people think that they want to be on a board and then discover it's not what they want to be? Where is that disconnect?
I think it depends because different people join different boards for different reasons. But that the main thing that I find wonderful about being on boards is it's a leadership position. I love your name,
Mm,
She Leadership, because boards lead. They don't
mm,
actually have individual power as people. They have to influence each other, and then the power resides in the board, in the group. A lot of people are not happy with being personally powerless and I was going to say at the mercy, but reliant on the group to make the right decisions. Because when everything you
mm.
can do has to be done through influence, it's quite scary.
Yeah. And as you kind of just sort of touched on, there are relationship dynamics, there is the compliance requirements. Like there's a lot of layers that are going on in one room. And what was it that came to mind just then? So oh, I've lost it. I've lost it. There was something that you said that I thought was interesting. Well, I've just recalled it. Sorry.
Yes, I'd hope
I
so.
did some research a little while ago. Like I, we're talking about imposter syndrome, obviously, and one of the things that kind of stands out for me for this conversation is that you don't often get a lot of women on boards. And it in some degree it's changing, and there's an ebb and flow, I think, to that. I was teaching university and we were looking at the executive leadership and the board of very big companies. And what was blaringly obvious is that the higher up the organization you went, the less diversity was evident. So as a woman on a board, what have you experienced in that regard? Like, have you ever found yourself in a position where you're the only female, but then you're the only voice that's contravening what everybody else is saying?
Yeah, I think if you're the only female, you are often going to be the only voice that is saying something slightly different to everyone else. Because you've had different experiences, you bring a different perspective. But the the interesting thing with women in the boardroom is most of the women that I know on boards who are seen as being good and valuable directors and therefore influential are women who
Mm-hmm.
also have learned how to be company directors. They understand how to read the financial statements. They take an interest in the business of the business. And I do find, as a general rule, and generalities are always false, but as a general rule, women directors tend to try harder and to put in more effort. Was it Hillary Clinton that said you have to be twice as good as a man before you're considered to be equal? Fortunately, that's not difficult. But yes, because we don't see it as our right, we see it as something that's been hard won, we do tend to put a little bit more effort into keeping it.
Yeah. So can you talk us through a little bit about what that first experience of, the imposter working through you, like when it comes to your awareness, do you recall one of those early experiences?
Well, my first experience on a board, I was I was an engineer. I was sent to run the Madrid office. So I arrived in Madrid. I had left my job. I had gone to Madrid to run this office, and I'm signing all the papers you sign. And one of them, instead of saying regional manager, Iberian Peninsula, said resident director. So I crossed that out and wrote in my job title, and the company accountant said, no, no, you can't do that. You're actually the resident director. And I said, well, no, I've got a contract. I'm actually the regional manager. He said, no, but you're on the board. I am. Am I? Yes. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, if the company does the wrong thing, you go to jail. And it's the law
Oh,
in Spain that a director, there must be one director who lives in Spain because that's the one that's easy to get and put in jail. And I said, so who are the other directors? Your boss and his boss back in London.
mm,
And
mm.
I thought, well, how do I know what's lawful? How do I know what's right? There's so much more to running a company than just managing an office and managing the projects that that office is running. So that was probably I don't know that it was an imposter moment, but it was a moment of, oh my gosh, this is daunting. I'd better gird up and get ready. And from that moment, I mean, this was in the late 1980s. From that moment, I started to study boards and look at what they needed and how they operated. And the more I studied, the more I liked it. But every time you join a new board, you sort of feel like, oh, how come I'm here? Would they have appointed
Mm.
me if they knew who I really was? Or, oh my gosh, everybody else here is so clever and they all know so much more than I do. And here I am at the table with the little bit I know, trying to add value to the huge bits they know. Um, and I think it just goes with the territory of constantly joining new teams, which is what board directors do as their careers evolve.
Yeah, it's great to hear your internal dialogue as you say that. And I think people listening could relate to that internal dialogue in many situations, particularly as you alluded to, like when they're new situations and you're just getting acclimatized. And you obviously know your stuff because you've done this so many times, but then there's this I wanted to say natural. It's not really natural, but this natural comparison that emerges. So have you ever found yourself in a position where the imposter syndrome has sort of stopped you from moving forward with your career or in a situation in your life?
Uh, yeah, a few times, and a few times, given my natural personality, a few times my imposter syndrome has led me to push forwards more forcefully than
Mm,
was really appropriate under the circumstance. And it's one of the problems I have with imposter syndrome is that we tend to think of it as it holds us back, it makes us play a small game, but sometimes it can actually make us be overstrident and it can make us destroy the relationships that we would be much better off developing and relying on to help us to overcome our feelings of inadequacy. It's a little bit like the little dog that growls. So more for me, it's that question of, am I feeling insecure? Don't retreat to the safety of what you know and the status of what you've done. Hold on to that insecurity and invite the people around you to help. And that is a lesson that I'm still learning and still working on, because it is not my natural thing. My natural thing is I'm feeling insecure. I'll put up the fences and I'll say, stuff you, I've got degrees in this. I know what I'm doing. Rather than saying, is everybody else feeling worried about this? Because I'm just really concerned about the decision we're making, or I'm really, really feeling honored and overawed to have been invited to join this board, instead of acting
Mm.
like, oh, well, of course I've been invited. So that takes a willingness to allow other people to see your insecurity, which I find as a director is really quite rare.
Yeah, yeah. So do you mind me just delving in a little bit here in
Mm.
terms of, I can certainly relate as somebody who was grown up to be self-sufficient and not ask for help and to almost have this like image of everything is perfect and you've got it handled, which actually, funny enough, is one of the characters of imposter syndrome, you know, the superwoman who can do everything and all the plates are spinning. So what was, or what has been and what is still potentially the process that you're going through in terms of being able to ask for help, and for other people who might be listening where this is a bit of a struggle point for them, and also how you identify who to ask for help from?
Yeah, that's a big one, because if you ask for help from the wrong person, if you display weakness or vulnerability to the wrong person, it's highly dangerous. But
Mm.
I think for me, the first thing is to get really real about what am I feeling. I was reading, in fact, it was a work of fiction a couple of years ago, but the protagonist had panic attacks, and her psychiatrist taught her to go through, what are 5 things I can see? What are 5 things I can hear? What are 5 things I can feel tactilely? What can I
Mhm.
smell and what can I taste? And
Mm.
just going through that actually grounds you in what's happening. And I find that, yes, sometimes when my heart's racing and I'm feeling very unsafe and vulnerable, maybe I've been asked to speak, or I'm the person who asks a question and I'm feeling a little bit of trepidation around it, to actually go, I'm sitting in a comfortable chair. The air conditioning's a bit cold, but I'm okay. Things are all right. I could smell my own perfume. I must have put too much on. But you run through these things, and it does actually tell your brain, look, yes, I know that I'm taking a risk by asking a question that I don't know the answer to. Or I know that I'm standing on a stage talking to a bunch of people at a conference. Yes, that's scary, but
Mm.
come on, it's okay. Everything around me is okay. And it is
Yeah.
funny how the imposter just pops up. And it came up at me on Tuesday night. I'm standing in a room, women on boards. What a lovely organization. What lovely people, and all these wonderful, lovely women. I was so excited to get there and catch up with all my old friends and meet some new ones. And then suddenly I thought, oh my gosh, these women are all younger than me. They're all prettier than me. They're all better dressed than me. They're all much more elegant. Uh, and you have to actually stop and say, no, Julie, come on, come on, look around the room. Yeah, if they're younger than you, then you're more experienced than them. If they're more elegant than you, it's because you're an engineer. You've been thinking about other things rather than looking elegant. And just gently bring yourself back to, you're not perfect, but you're okay. you're here
Mm.
because this is where you are, and it's okay. And
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, well, actually, 99 million times out of 100 million times for women in Australia, we're going to be okay in those business
Yeah.
conversations and those social conversations. We're not in an environment where those things could be life-threatening, but they feel it sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it is funny how it pops up, even when you think this is a relaxed, happy organization, this is a relaxed, happy event, and I shouldn't be, and that's the other thing, I shouldn't be feeling this. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Especially for me, because yeah, I grew up loving Mr. Spock on Star Trek. That's not logical. No, it's not. Um, it's because you're human, Julie. If only you were Vulcan, you'd be fine, but you're not.
I love that conversation. The distortion and having the awareness to see the distortion. So for me, I relate to it. It's like almost like the anxiety takes you out of your body, or because you're having such a heart racing response, you can't actually think logically, like it takes something. And if you don't have the awareness, you get caught up in the sweep of that emotion and that woo, all of this stuff going on. And you can actually self-destruct without having an alternative tool, and having that awareness to go, oh, hang on, let me really take stock here, because my body's reacting like I'm in danger. But if I take a really good look here, what's actually going, and like you say, what's actually going on is that you're in an air conditioned environment. You've put on a little bit too much perfume. You're perfectly healthy. You're not under threat at all. Um, and then it gives you access to just kind of relax, and then almost like, I want to say, have permission to just be yourself. Like, because you don't have to, because the comparison can make you feel like you've got to perform or put on a mask or be something that you're not. Right. And
Yeah.
and I love that, Julie. It's such a great distinction.
Yeah, well, as soon as you feel like, oh, I've got to be the professional Julie, or I've got to be the director, or I've got to chair this meeting, and you put on those masks, they're very hard to pull off.
Mm,
And
yeah.
once you're behind the mask, you're not being the person that you really are. You're being the
Yeah.
little bits of it that shine through the mask. So trying to always be you, even if you are not as good at some things as other people. Let's face it, I cannot break dance at all, not even as badly as the lady at the Olympics. Um,
Uh-huh.
but nobody expects me to. Why would I
Yeah.
have to? Why would I want to? As soon as you start putting on that mask of I've got to be good enough at everything, um, you already are. You're good enough at the
Mm,
things you're good at. And that
yeah.
covers the things that you're not good at, and they don't really impact you. The imposter syndrome as well. I mean, I go back to my first board experience, like, oh my gosh, I'm in this responsible position and I have no idea what my
Mm,
responsibilities are, let alone how to discharge them well. Um,
yeah.
that is a very useful imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But the imposter syndrome of I'm chairing this meeting, therefore I've got to be in control and I've got to look like I can handle everybody. And no, that's not useful. And
Mm,
in good boards, you will occasionally see the chair valiantly trying to rein in a discussion and get it back onto track, or just stop it so you can move on with the agenda. But every director is independent and has a duty to do what they think is best under the circumstances. And every so often you'll see a really good chair just give up and go, yeah, I'm the chair, but this discussion's not stopping. I'll just sit back. We'll sort out the agenda later, or we'll run late, or we'll do something by circular resolution afterwards. It doesn't matter. And it's when you let go of the mask, you can actually be more effective, because instead of worrying about keeping the mask, you can really think about, what do I need to achieve? And how do I, from this point in time, with these real things going on around me, how do I keep pushing towards that outcome? And how do I bring the other people with me to that outcome? Because me knowing what I think is the right answer doesn't cut it in the boardroom. I've got to know what I think is the right answer, and the board has to decide what the board thinks is the right answer. And I have to, as an individual, sometimes let go of my right answer and take the board's right answer, because that's the best outcome.
Yeah, such a growth opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you confront different opinions, you're having to be able to be with those different opinions, even if you don't agree with them. I imagine at times it can be quite agitating to your system, right? So, and then if you're finding yourself, if there's elements of the imposter and there's the, the power dynamic and all of these things going on, you're really having to develop that self-awareness and manage yourself through that process.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is the knowing when to listen and how to listen to understand. We so often listen to respond, particularly when we've already been good, diligent directors and read our board papers and formed an opinion. That's my opinion. It's nothing more than my opinion. It's not something to defend to the death. It's something perhaps to share with the others, and maybe not. If their opinions seem better on the day, maybe my one can be not shared, if I think it's going to lead to the right outcome. So getting over yourself and recognizing that your opinion is not a fact. The fact is that you, with your experience and your qualifications and your knowledge, have that opinion is a fact. But the opinion itself is a piece of fiction, and don't get hung up on it. But when other people have opinions, instead of contradicting them, understand, how did they form that opinion? Where did it come from? Why do they believe that? Because often you find, when you understand it, even though it's still different to yours, you can appreciate it. And that takes a lot of effort, especially if you're an extrovert like me, because I often joke that occasionally there's a photo of me with my mouth closed and I don't recognize myself, because I think by talking through my ideas. And again, in the boardroom, on the one hand, I am my authentic self, but I am my most effective authentic self, which means that I stop myself talking through my thoughts, because that's disruptive to the meeting. And so again, that awareness, and I don't know quite where that awareness fits with imposter syndrome, but definitely it does. That stopping myself from my immediate instinctive response to think through, no, hang on, where am I? What am I doing? What am I trying to achieve? What is the best way to do that? And then responding. And a lot of the time, when you really have thought it through, the imposter goes away and you're left just with a nice, clear, strategic path forwards.
Yeah. And there's definitely an intersection, I think, between the imposter and awareness. And I believe I started calling it the decision matrix. You know, it's that bubble of time and space between action and reaction, where you've got to think about how you're going to move forward with something. What is the best outcome? What are you looking to achieve in that? And really just take that time to process that information before you speak or do anything, really, you know.
Yes.
And I think, you know, it's like what you said with regards to how to listen. You know, it's such a powerful gift to have an ability to listen for, rather than listening to respond, you know,
Yeah.
and listening for whatever it's going to be. So I talk to people about listening for the gold in conversations, or listening for how you can contribute, you know, or listening for a concern that somebody might have. That whole notion of listening for is really phenomenal.
It is. And those concerns are the gold. When somebody says you can't do that because this could go wrong. So we need to do that and make sure this doesn't go wrong. How do we have
Yeah.
both? And without getting into quantum physics, trying to have your cake and eat it is very often the job of the board. You want to pay dividends and you want to reinvest in growth. Yeah. You want to survive on the government's funding and you want to achieve these great things. Yeah. They're not really contradictory, but they can seem contradictory. And then having the courage to take the risks that you need to take. And I think that again is the thing with imposter syndrome is it
Yeah.
allows you to risks and recognizing them and recognizing which ones are real. Why is this situation feeling threatening? What's the real risk here? And what are the ones that I'm getting excited about, which might not necessarily be the most important ones? So that constant, yeah, we have brains. Somebody once said to me, you have to have an optimism of the heart with a pessimism of the brain. And I'm not too sure that I agree with pessimism of the brain, but I know what they mean. You've got to, even when you can see all the risks, and in fact, especially when you can see all the risks, you've got to still keep pushing towards those goals and objectives that you've chosen as your measure of success.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, it's such a great conversation. So if I were to ask you, you know, I can hear that you've got such a depth of awareness and resources, you know, in terms of how you're thinking through different scenarios and able to navigate your way through that. And I think, you know, that's such a gift in this conversation. So speaking of gifts, what would you say the gift of imposter syndrome has been, or the gift of the imposter has been for you?
I think for me, the gift of the imposter has been a bouquet of barbed wire, in some respect, because my instinctive reaction to a feeling of insecurity and inadequacy is to do more and to be more and to address more forcefully. And it has taken me a very long time to actually look at my imposter feelings and go, no, I'm not going to speak louder to get my point across. Yes, I'm fearful that my point is being lost and it's not being heard and the board is going in the wrong direction. But I am not going to do what I would normally do. I'm going to try something else. And when you learn what is effective in communication for that group or for that environment. And you learn to harness your imposter. I think that's when you start to become effective. When your imposter is just dragging you, you're
Mm.
not effective. But when you've got your
Yeah.
imposter well and truly under control, then it can power you a little.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. Like you mentioned before, that I don't believe that all the manifestations of imposter are negative. And, certainly the whole thing came about as a result of studies done on women who are high achieving. And they found that just because they were high achieving, actually the louder that imposter got, in terms of those feelings of inadequacy, or that they didn't deserve the accolades that they were getting and the recognition that they were getting. And so being able to recognize and actually maybe sitting down and doing a bit of a list of how does the imposter manifest, and then what are the positives and the negatives of that, in the sense of where is it productive and where does it become dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I have this perfectionist streak, which I think has some fantastic productive, outcomes, but it also can be quite dysfunctional when I become obsessive about something that really doesn't matter, and I'm spending way too much time on it. So being able to assess something as productive or, just dysfunctional or whatever, redundant, I think is a good balance, because it kind of keeps you in check. And then it doesn't, how would I put this? Like villainize the imposter, as,
Mm.
which is a fairly typical narrative out there. It just becomes, I like to call it like, it's just a mechanism of the mind. And, some of the things that you talked about is, when you understand what's par for the course, and how the mechanism of the mind is going to respond as par for the course of that situation, you can start to actually disentangle from the emotion of those situations. So for you to be able to say, like, when you find yourself in situations, you might have been inclined to dig in your heels and to be more forceful and to speak more, do these things, and to understand that the mechanism of the mind, this is par for the course for you. And then to be able to say, right, now we can unhook from the emotion of that and then choose a different way of being, and choose, a path that's going to get you a totally different result.
Mm. Yes,
Yeah.
I think our minds, we still don't understand how they really work.
Yeah.
And however they work, turning them to good use is
Yeah.
a very good use of our minds. Whereas
Yeah.
worrying about, oh, I've got this syndrome, I shouldn't have it. Like, no, you've got that syndrome. Use it for all it's worth. Yeah,
Yeah.
mine manifests slightly differently, not so much in perfectionism, but in doing too much. So I can't do things well enough. And I'm
Yeah.
constantly scurrying around correcting things because I've tried to do too much too fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't know whether that's just a character fault or whether that's my imposter telling me, you're not good enough, Julie, you've got to do more. But
Mm.
understanding, and it comes with age, doesn't it? Understanding our own minds and understanding this is how I normally respond. This is what it normally does. Let's try something different this time. Yeah,
Mm.
definition of madness, doing something and expecting it, if you do the same thing, to give a different result. If you're
Yeah.
not happy with the results, do something different. And if your mind is going crazy and screaming at you, don't do something different, that's risky. That's when you sit back and you say, well, let's analyze that risk. Let's get really clear on just
Mm.
what is the risk. And yeah, things like
Yeah.
job interviews, if I stuff it up and I don't get that board seat, well, I didn't have the board seat to start with. I haven't actually lost anything. what could go wrong? Yeah, it's the same with yeah, occasionally you write proposals for people and you say, oh, I could come and help your board do this. And they write back and say, we know we asked for this, but no thanks. And you think, God, what did I do wrong? Probably nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
probably.
classic one. For women, I find in particular that internalizing of what's wrong with me.
Yes,
It's just so innate, it seems to be in the conversation, you know, and just to be able to arrest that and say, no, we're not going to have that conversation anymore. And there's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong here. It's just, you know, you put
it's,
an offer out and some will and some won't. And so what? And next.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you go back in history and look at your spreadsheets, which I do, there's a statistical likelihood, and that's just the way of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I've mentioned already and acknowledged the awareness and, you know, just the insights that you've been able to share today. And I'm curious, like for somebody who's just starting out on this journey or just sort of starting to become aware of these things for themselves, like were there any resources or people or anything that kind of helped you along in this journey, like to be able to develop that level of awareness that we talked about?
I'm a great believer in the idea that things resonate for a reason.
Mm,
And so if something catches your attention,
yeah.
it's, and as with that book, you know, it was a book about a policeman in New York who had an anxiety disorder. It was a piece of fiction, but there was something in there that when I read it, I went, oh, I could use that.
Mm,
I could actually take that on. So don't just go to specific resources for specific purposes. As you're living your life, look and say, why is that catching my attention? What's in that for me?
mm,
And yeah, sometimes it's just that it gives you joy.
yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be useful. And but it's always, there's a reason you're interested in something. And
Yeah.
then in terms of books and thinking, there's a very good book by Martin Seligman called Learned Optimism,
Okay. Yes. Nice.
which I find very useful. Um, Hard to get these days, but there was a wonderful book called The Human Face of Corporate Governance. But any of the readings on interpersonal dynamics, Barker's Seven Skills of Inquiry, um, Argyris's Ladder of Inference. I love the Ladder of Inference because
Yeah.
whenever I run into a problem, the answer's always two rungs lower. Um,
Wow. That's
but
awesome.
actually going down two rungs to find the answer,
Yeah.
um, you have to think about that. But constantly building the foundation before you put up the structure is a
Yeah.
good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
none of us get up in the morning and put on our lipstick before we clean our teeth,
Yeah.
but we often try to make a decision before we've built a shared understanding.
Mm,
So I find any of those books about team dynamics, um, and stick to the experts. You read the people who are at the big universities or the people who have been thoroughly peer reviewed. Um, Read them first. And
yeah.
then when you read the others who just got their natural brilliance, which I'm so jealous of, but when you read those, you've got a context to put
Mm,
them in.
yeah.
Reading something very persuasive and brilliant without the context, I find sometimes can be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And so for anyone listening, what advice would you give them about this journey of the imposter and, how to approach it, how to think about it, just generally in life?
I'd say you're okay. You are where you are because of things that have happened and things that you've made happen. But that doesn't mean you can't be somewhere else that you want to be. And it doesn't mean that you have no right to want to be somewhere else.
Mm.
But the more you step back and think about how am I going to do this, and come back to the practicalities, the more I find you silence the imposter or you bring the imposter to help you.
Yeah.
So that whole question of I had a friend who was an accountant, had a career break, had children. The children were of an age where she didn't need to do something. She went, I don't want to be an accountant. She went back to university and studied medicine. And a
Yeah.
lot of people said, oh, how could she do that? That's 7 years and what an expense. Like, yeah, but at the end of the 7 years, she's still got at least 15 years of career ahead of her doing what she really wants to do,
Yeah.
and adding value to the community.
Yeah.
Whereas if she'd studied medicine and found she didn't like it when she left school, she would probably have only had a 5 or 10 year career and then given up and gone and done something else, and
Mm.
nobody would have said anything.
Yeah.
So you have a right to want whatever you want,
Beautiful.
but you've then got to take practical steps to get it.
Yeah.
And your imposter might tell you some of the things that you need to take those steps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie.
you're welcome.
So if someone's listening and they're interested in learning more about being on a board or getting on a board, would you be open to them getting in touch with you?
Very much.
Yep.
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I actually live here in the real world, but I feel sometimes like I live on LinkedIn. But reach out to me on LinkedIn, and never underestimate the power of learning. If
Mm.
you want to be on a board, study being on a board, maybe join a board of a not-for-profit, but ask the other directors, acknowledge, I'm new, I haven't done this, I haven't studied it, I want your help. Acknowledging your imposter,
Yeah.
people normally run to help.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you. We're going to put your contact details in the show notes, so it makes it easy for people to get in touch. Julie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Oh, thank you. It's been an interesting journey for me too.
And we are done. Thank you.
Oh, gosh.
My speaker cut out at the halfway through there, so I had to put you on my laptop computer, but that's all good. How did you feel that went?
Yeah, it was interesting, just looking at things from a different perspective,
Yeah.
and looking at things rather than from the how do I get this board to do these things,
Yeah.
or how do I get to be on this board, but to look at, well, what's going on inside of me when
Mm.
I am trying those things. Yeah, it's a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think from a leadership perspective, there's a lot of value in having, my ambition is to create that level of awareness and mental processing in people, in leaders as much as I can, because I think 99% of problems would go away if people understood that. But it's not necessarily an area of expertise for people because their area of expertise is whatever they've studied and, spent a lot of time mastering. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I hope I didn't give the appearance that I was always thinking in that way. Most of the time, you're on autopilot, and it's only
Yeah.
from time to time that you catch yourself and actually take the controls and manage your course. Your self-awareness is often dormant.
That's my passion, is bringing that to the fore, and recognize those patterns, because it's a bit like, there's this wonderful poem that talks about this person who walks down the street and there's a hole in this in the path and they fall in the hole. That's chapter 1. And then chapter 2, they fall in the hole again. And chapter 3, they know the hole is there, and they still fall in the hole, and they do this a couple of times until chapter 7, when they go, I'll walk down a different street. Rather than,
Yeah.
I'll send it to you, but it's a great poem that sort of illustrates that level of awareness to then make a different decision to get a different result,
I
Yeah.
often recommend people to read. There's a book by Federico Garcia Lorca, who
Mhm.
wrote a book called The Chronicle of a Death Foretold. And
Okay. Sounds very
everybody,
dramatic.
oh, it's a horrific book because everybody knows that this guy is going to kill this guy, and
Yeah.
he has to. It's an honor thing. So he tells his friends that he's going to be in this place and he's going to kill the guy because he wants the word to get out so the guy never goes to that place at that time. Um, and everybody knows that this is going to happen, and everybody tells everybody else, but nobody tells the guy.
Oh, wow.
And so the guy who doesn't want to commit the murder has to commit the murder because the guy whose death has been foretold all week still turns up. And it is just the most amazing book about miscommunication and false assumptions,
Yeah.
and also about thinking that
Yeah.
you've got to do. Just a really sad book. And then, of course, just to liven things up again, there's a joke in Spain about two gay men. It would have to be two gay men. But they're walking down the street. Is that shit? I don't know. Is that shit? Smells like shit. Feels like shit. Are you sure? Tastes like shit. Oh, let me have a taste. Yeah, it does taste like. Well, move! Don't tread in it. And yeah, again, it's that whole issue of going so far to understand something when actually, if it looks like shit, just don't tread in it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting story. I will let you go because I'm conscious of your time. But I was talking with someone recently who has been through a lot of trauma in their life, and it has held them back and it has impacted them. And she's now in her 70s and she's running this business, and she kind of realized that she's running out of time. Trauma continue, if she can allows this trauma to continue to impact her in this way, she's not going to achieve her goals. And it was just a mindset shift that she just needed to get on with stuff now. And I've been through a similar metamorphosis recently, in that regard. And I think that story is right on point for that.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll have to look up that book.
It's, I wonder, can I quickly grab it and drop it in the chat? Um, yes, let me. And it was, of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, not Federico Garcia Lorca. I always get those two muddled up. They're,
That's an incredible name, both of them.
Yeah, Gabriel Garcia Marquez was a friend of Picasso
All right.
and one of the great voices of Spanish literature. So was Federico Garcia Lorca, but they amazing authors, both of them.
Yeah. I've got that link. Thank you. I'll look it up on the Internet Archive, see if I can find it there.
Yep. Yeah, it's probably available nowadays free because it's quite an old book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in one of my Spanish schools, we studied it.
Right.
So
Good.
wonderful. Okay, I will let you get on with your. I could chat with you forever.
Yeah, I
But
was just going to say, well, let's not leave it long between catch-ups. And I'm here, so if you reach out, and yeah, I just think we can have some really great synergies, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
I hope so. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll see you around professional speakers, I'm sure. Are you going
Yes,
to
you will.
convention in Brisbane?
No, I have to look at it. Yeah, I'll look up the details. I haven't decided anything yet.
Yep,
Yeah.
because if you can,
What
it is.
what were the dates? Do you remember?
Oh, was it the 23rd to the? It's in
Um,
March.
Oh, it's in March.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but watch out. It would be from the Friday the 21st to Monday the 24th.
Yeah.
And of March.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sells out, so
Okay. All right then.
worth getting in. There's usually sort of in February, there's a little bit of, I've got tickets and now I'm being paid to speak in America, so I won't be going. Does anyone want to buy them for what I paid for them?
Yeah.
But
Don't rely on that.
don't rely on it, they disappear so quickly. And
Yeah.
I just find, and the other thing is don't just go for convention, go for the workshops before and the workshops afterwards,
Yeah.
because you just need the time to talk to all those people. And
Mm.
it's, yeah, but it, for me, it's like my little annual shot of enthusiasm and joy
Yeah.
together with 4 or 5 insights.
Yeah.
I then come home and try desperately to implement.
All right. Well, I'll look
Still
out
got
for
one
that.
unimplemented. I've got to get onto it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It takes time to integrate stuff sometimes, like your mind is aware of it, but then it just takes time for the body to tune in.
yeah, and you can't come back and implement everything all at once.
No, you're
You've
going to.
got to prioritize and say, well, I'm just going to do this one. It might not be the most important or the most impactful, but I've got to start somewhere. I'm going to start with this one and then on the next.
Yeah.
But yes, I'd better have done them all before I go back to the next one, because PSA holds people to account.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. That's a great environment to be in.
Yeah, who is it? Keith Abraham. He talks about PSA as accountability buddies.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the most horrible word, but it's so cute. Accountability buddies. And when you do one of his paid workshops, very often he'll pair you up afterwards as accountability buddies.
Oh, yeah.
So you have this person who's your accountability buddy who's going to make sure you do what you said you would do, and you're going to have a conversation in 2 weeks' time. And what have you done?
Yeah.
And you're going to keep having conversations until you've done it.
Yeah, that's good. You need that structure, right? Because
Yeah.
without the structure, you just forget, you go on autopilot, you go
Yeah.
unconscious.
You just do what you've always done. And then all of a sudden it's like, why didn't I get anything better? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't do anything different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave me a comment and let me know what was your biggest takeaway. And if while you were listening, somebody popped into your mind and you know that they would benefit from listening to this, be sure to send the link to them. This series is just getting started, so go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll know when our next episode drops. If you liked what you heard and you want to know more, be sure to check out the show notes, and over the next coming weeks, I'll have some giveaways for you too. In the meantime, I want to thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.